Okay, yeah, sure. That's a good idea too, Dad.
I'm not that old, but...
Oh.
No, what's the name of the movie?
Sinister.
Wow.
And I was their bag of food. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my channel. Today I am joined by my dad, Matt, once again.
I'm back!
He's back.
Actually, Kylie, I'm not just back. I've been here the whole time. You're the one that's been gone.
I'm back.
I'm still here.
Yeah, but we're back together. And so today we are going to be reviewing a couple of movies. We're going to be talking about the Sinister franchise. Well, okay, it's not technically a franchise yet. There's only 2 movies, but it's likely that they're going to make more. To start out, we're going to talk about the first Sinister movie. This came out in 2012 and it's rated a 64%. True crime writer Ellison Oswald is in a slump. He hasn't had a bestseller in more than 10 years and is becoming increasingly desperate for a hit. So when he discovers the existence of a snuff film showing the deaths of a family, he vows to solve the mystery. He moves his own family into the victim's home and gets to work. However, when old film footage and other clues hint at the presence of a supernatural force, Ellison learns that living in the house may be fatal. Okay, so I just want to start out and kind of talk about our general thoughts. So do you want to kick it off, Father?
First of all, it was fun to see Ethan Hawke. A youngish Ethan Hawke was in this movie. I don't know how they snagged him, but he was the main character, really. I liked the concept. I said it to you right from the beginning. The fact about that he was a true crime writer and that what he had done with his family, his wife and 2 kids, is he moved to the cities where there had been these murders and would go try to find the missing person from each one of these murders and then write a book about it. And so he had done this 3 times previously. We find out at the beginning the first one was a New York Times bestseller called Kentucky Blood, but then the next 2 hadn't done so well, we find later, and he's just moved his family to this new town to start this movie. I liked just the thought of it. I felt like you could maybe even do a 10-part series of an author moving, maybe to do long-form magazine pieces, but to move to the town and try to figure out the things that the local police haven't been able to figure out before. So it piqued my interest right off the bat. That and Ethan Hawke.
That would be a really good idea, actually, now that you mention it. I think that that would be a really cool even TV show.
Yeah.
Instead of a true crime show that centers around the police department solving the crime, it could be centered on a writer.
Maybe we should do it.
We could do it, maybe someday.
Hey, maybe sometime once COVID's over, we jump in the car, go to a town, try to solve a mystery.
Oh, that's what you want? Okay, I thought that you were talking about writing the show, because yes, that would be doable. I don't know, do you want to move around and solve true crime murders?
Well, maybe.
Okay, maybe we'll pick that up as a
We've
hobby.
done a lot of road trips over the years.
That's true, okay. Let's just
different
throw in
things.
some murders.
Something to think about.
Just for fun. Okay.
Maybe we could solve pet crimes. Keep it more simple. You know, they just don't know where little Benji went. He's disappeared.
Okay, yeah, sure. That's a good idea too, Dad. I agree with a lot of those general thoughts. I like this movie. It's not one of my favorites necessarily, but I do enjoy it. It's from the same creators as Insidious, so that piques my interest as well. One thing that I found interesting about this movie is the way that it was shot. A lot of it is shot with a ton of negative space, so you see almost nothing aside from maybe him and his phone flashlight and stuff like that. What I mean by that is the whole screen is basically black and you can only see tiny little bits and pieces. And as we've talked about before, I find more appreciation in what we can't see, because often what we imagine is happening is far worse than anything that could actually happen. So I love that tactic by filmmakers to show a little and then make you think a lot. And as we started to watch the second movie, you actually made a comment noting that there were people that were dying and their faces were covered with burlap sacks, and you basically said the same thing, that you liked that their faces were covered. It
made it much more scary.
Right, because any face that we could imagine of them in terror and whatnot would be worse probably than what they were actually doing. So what did you think about the soundtrack of this movie? Do you remember it? It was the sound of the flipping film.
The thing that I thought about, and before we started rolling camera here, one of the main characters was an inanimate object in Sinister, which was this old movie projector. And this old movie projector was evil, and it wouldn't go away, and it was as if it was alive. And the sound from that movie that still sticks with me is the sound of this old
projector, right? Flipping.
Yeah,
the film
what kind
reel?
of film do you call it?
Super 8?
Super 8 film. The sound of it going in an old projector, like I would have heard when I was a young man in the late 60s, early 60s. I wasn't a young man, I was a child, but I'm not that old. But I do remember those. And the sound of that was really the soundtrack to the movie, for me personally.
Yeah, and no, it was. They incorporated a lot into the score, and it didn't quite sound like music, and that really made it a lot more disturbing. I don't know, I should have looked it up, but it kind of reminded me of Insidious as well, where they only used string instruments and, you know, weird noises that didn't really sound like music. It's the same creators from Insidious, so it had a very similar tone with the music, so I was just curious to know what you thought about that. So I had only seen Ethan Hawke in Dead Poets Society and The Purge, I believe, but you are more of a fan of him. How did you feel he did in this role, maybe compared to different roles that he's been in?
I thought it was okay. You know, I was excited when he came on the screen, or maybe I saw it in the credits to begin the movie, made a comment to you, oh, Ethan Hawke's in this. I like him as an actor. It's not one of those roles where I'd say, wow, I can't see anybody else being that.
Right, like
that
Dr.
particular
Lecter.
person.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Lecter or Misery with Kathy Bates.
Oh, yeah.
It could have been somebody else. He was fine. The projector and the films were much
That's
more
what got
important
you.
than Ethan Hawke.
The demon and all of that. I think that he's a good actor. It's just, it's a little bit problematic with this movie because he's not really a likable character. He certainly put his family in danger moving into the house, which isn't really poor taste, which was actually mentioned by one of the officers in the movie that came to check up on the family. He said it's in really poor taste that you're living in this house after what happened there, and he's writing about the people. I can understand the side of the argument that's saying, well, he's trying to figure out what happened to them, to bring justice maybe, but his ultimate intention was really just to write another great novel, just not a super likable character, not my favorite performance by him.
He was reaching. They set the premise, as I mentioned earlier. No earthquake. They set the premise early at the very beginning of the film that he had not had success with his last 2 books. So a main theme of this is he's hard up. It's not the word I'm looking for, but determined, but that's not it either. But anyway, he wants another hit. He's had his first hit, Kentucky Blood, was a huge hit. And in the very beginning, 2 policemen are waiting outside the house, and one of them wants to get it signed, and the sheriff tells him, no, don't do that. But the last 2 haven't worked. So we realize as this movie progresses that he did not tell his wife and family that the murders that he was going to be writing about had actually happened in this house. And he did that because he was at wit's end. He kept saying, one more, I just need another hit. And then we'll be able to be on Easy Street. We'll be able to move back home. He was willing to do almost anything. And then as the movie progressed, he just got more and more, whatever the word is that I'm trying to think of right this minute. He was kind of losing his mind as time went by. He was drinking more, and he was just obsessed with it. He wasn't trying to be a good dad. He wasn't trying to be a good husband. He was just trying to figure this out and basically willing to do whatever it took.
And I will say that that's not really a spoiler because you find out that he didn't tell his wife very early on from his first interaction with the police officer,
right.
So that's not really a spoiler. But this next question will have a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear it, and just skip to this time right here. But what did you think of the unhappy ending with the family dying? How do you feel about unhappy endings in horror in general too?
In the horror genre that you need both kinds of movies. You need some of them that actually feel kind of good at the very end after you've had the heck scared out of you off and on during the entire movie. And then I think it's just to have some movies be so sad, so disturbing, so upsetting that you're looking at the other person you're with, if you're watching it with them, and just saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. I didn't think that Ethan Hawke was anyway. It wasn't a good place to end it up.
No, don't worry, I warned them about spoilers, so yeah. Ethan Hawke, his little girl, I thought that it would be the son because the son had been acting out at school, drawing pictures on the whiteboard with permanent markers and whatever, was just saying really rude things to his parents. I thought it was going to be him that the demon chose to slaughter the family, but it was actually the daughter, so it was almost a plot twist in that way, and the ending took me really off guard. And if you're one of those people that watches horror movies as more of a cathartic experience to deal with your anxieties and fears and whatnot, this is probably not the movie for you.
This isn't a good one.
It's not a good one for you.
No.
This movie is really intense, and the Sinister movies are, dare I say, probably some of the most disturbing movies that we've watched. Maybe not for body horror or other elements like that, but just conceptually, this demon that steals one of your children, but first makes them kill their whole family and record it.
It's evil. Evil,
It's so-
evil.
Well, sinister. It's sinister.
Right.
Which also I think is funny. What do you think of the people that also made Insidious? They also made a 2-part series called Sinister. Do you think they could have been more creative, or do you like that title?
I kind of like it. I liked both the titles. Sinister was a great title for this movie. And this movie, this was dark. I mean,
so dark.
As far as what happens to victims in these two movies, it's as bad as it gets, pretty much.
Pretty much, because in the second one, well, we'll talk about it. Maybe we should move on to the second one right now. So
I want to add one thing there. One thing that did happen, the guy that I mentioned at the very beginning of the movie that wanted to get an autograph of Kentucky Blood, who was a sheriff's deputy, he ends up meeting up with Ethan Hawke again, and then he's really interested in all of this, and so he wants to be his assistant and have his name in Ethan Hawke's new book, like at the beginning, thanking Sheriff so-and-so, as he calls Deputy so-and-so. The one thing that brought these two movies together, as we'll discuss, was near the end of the movie, Deputy so-and-so is calling Ethan Hawke, and Ethan Hawke is not taking his call. He never takes his call.
frustrating. You know, if it was a normal situation where he was just studying a regular murder and whatnot, I could understand that. But he fully was aware that he was studying something supernatural and did not have a full understanding of it. So if someone was repeatedly calling me after dealing with something like that, I probably wouldn't be trying to just put it behind me. I'd probably want to know what they had to say.
Unlike a lot of these kinds of movies where you would think, well, Ethan Hawke is trying to solve this, he never was really trying to solve it. He was just in it. And with every movie that he put on that old projector, it just got worse and worse and worse. And by the time he realized what was happening, he was so into himself and trying to get a good book written, he lost sight of himself. He wasn't trying to solve the mystery, which happens so often in horror films. You know, some person or people are trying to solve it. If I think about it, he wasn't really trying to solve it. He just was in the middle of it. And
Which is, it's basically the opposite of what happens in The Ring. Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of didn't really notice that.
Yeah.
You're right. So now Sinister 2?
Yes.
Okay. So Sinister 2 came out in 2015, and Sinister 2 only received a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. Hiding from her abusive, estranged husband, Courtney Collins lives in a rural house with her 9-year-old twins, Dylan and Zach. Young Dylan receives nightly visits from ghoulish kids who show him disturbing images of families being slaughtered. It's all part of the grand plan of Boogle, the evil spirit who recruits innocent children to murder their loved ones. The only hope for his intended new victims may be a former deputy who's familiar with Boogle's fiendish work from the past. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and let my dad kick it off this time yet again.
so the bridge between the two movies is Deputy So-and-so, who is kind of the star of the second movie. We learn his name, and I can't think of his name right this very minute. But
We just call him Deputy So-and-so.
He's not Deputy So-and-so in this movie, but he's the connection between the two movies as far as the human world part of it. He was fired because of what happened in the Sinister movie, and now he's a private detective, and he is researching all of these houses. Ethan Hawke had been researching it in the first movie, and he shows up at this house, and the other thing that bridges it is, what do you know, the old movie projector and people sitting watching really, really, really evil, terrible things. That gets worse because near the end of the movie, you find out who's actually filming these terrible things happening and how they're doing it, which you don't know exactly when Sinister's over, the first movie, but by the time the second one's over, you know exactly what's happened, and it makes it even that much more disturbing, I thought.
I mean, in the first one, the young daughter did film her father.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but it really wasn't clear until in the second one there was this horde of children that had been influenced by the demon. And you really find out what happens, and they show it in a lot more detail, because in the first one, I feel like it was a little bit more PG-13, if that's even safe to say about these movies,
Barely.
but you didn't see her tying up her family and doing all this.
Second one.
The second one was a lot more brutal, and I think I remember back in 2015, I don't know if that was the year that I first saw the movie, but at the time when I was only 16 years old or whatever, it was the most scary movie that I've ever seen at that time. It still frightened me a lot. There were still some jump scares that made me literally scream when we were watching it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's the scariest movie I'd ever seen now, but it's just really disturbing in a way that's kind of hard to explain unless you watch it and you experience it.
I think that we've discussed this in previous videos. What makes this go to the next level is it involves children, and we've talked about this in the past. The people in this movie, the most evil people are children. There's a group of children in this particular movie. What's the name of the movie?
Sinister?
Oh, yes, Sinister. Sinister 2. There's a group of children that are very, very evil. You learn how evil they are as they make this young boy watch their movies, and that's what took this to another level for me. There was kids doing these things.
Yeah, and it's also crazy because at this point, these little kid ghosts are fully evil, which is... It's strange to say and might be strange to believe, but some of the dates on the videos that they showed to Dylan were from 70s, 80s, 60s
too.
And so these kids that died way back when have been with the demon and manipulating children for 50 plus years, yeah, at this point. So these children were evil. They just, had been impressionable in their youth when they were alive, and then they were stuck forever immortalized as children after they killed their families. So it's a really weird concept, and I also wanted to ask you what you thought of the children, if you thought that the special and practical effects used with their makeup and everything was effective, and just their general look, were they frightening?
I thought they were really frightening, and I think one of the things that was good about it was that they didn't make them look really scary with makeup and special effects until they needed them to be. They looked just like normal children, and I think that really helped draw you in more.
Yeah.
Now, eventually they get to look worse when they get to a certain stage, but they look like normal children, so it's kind of easier to go along with what's going on because they seem like normal children. And even though they start to show this young boy these movies of killing families, they still don't seem like the kids themselves are evil.
Now I'm so curious to know what you think, because I haven't really formed an opinion about this yet, but do you think that...
I do not like Donald Trump.
Okay, me either. Good. Glad we got that out of the way.
That's not the question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
What was I just talking about?
You wanted to ask me a question, and I thought it was about Donald Trump. I'm sorry.
This is something that I haven't formed an opinion on yet, and I am trying to figure it out. But do you think that children were made scary by horror, or do you think that children somehow, because of their unpredictability, how impressionable they are, do you think that they already were frightening and horror just used that to its advantage? It's kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Wow, that's pretty deep.
I know, so whatever you guys think, definitely comment down below, because I'm sure everyone's opinion is going to be a little bit different.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
But I think it's because they are children.
Children were frightening first. I think so too.
I think that's why they're used now that you talk about it.
Yeah.
And you and I have watched a lot of horror movies together, really for the first time in my life, mentioned in previous videos. Children are used a lot, and you're right. They are scary in and of themselves because they're not fully developed adults, so you're much less likely to have any idea, one, of what they might do, and two, it's hard to see them being evil. And then when they do anything that's even kind of evil, it multiplies it.
I think that that's due to their impressionable nature, because I don't think any child is really born evil, but they can be manipulated super easily.
Right.
The younger they are, the more easy they are to manipulate. So maybe that's some social commentary as well, just saying. I think also because I've just heard random stories on the internet and stuff of people who have 2- and 3-year-old children that claim that they have an invisible friend, which is totally normal, but sometimes they just will say the darndest things that make you totally question, is my child seeing a ghost?
Well, I have to admit, your mother and I did think that you were a little zombie at one point.
What? Are you joking, or do you have a story?
No, I'm joking.
Okay.
Although that we did dress you up like the devil for Halloween, and that could have some type of long-term impact on you.
Actually, I want to correct this because
Oh, you're a devil's food cake, and we were devils.
You know how most children, their first Halloween when they're a baby, their family will dress them up as a pumpkin or a ladybug, but my whole family dressed up as devils, and I was their bag of food.
Yes.
Quite an iconic moment for the Johnson
Maybe
family.
that's why you've gravitated towards the horror genre.
Maybe. Also, I've just always dressed up as something scary for Halloween. I was never anything cute. There were pictures of me dressing up as a princess and stuff on the off time, not during spooky season, but for Halloween, I was always something scary. I was a witch, I was a dead cheerleader, I was a vampire. This was all when I was 5, 6, 7 years old.
Well, I can't believe they let you get away with that.
I don't know, you just...
Bad parent.
No, not at all. Not at all. They sold those costumes in catalogs, so obviously you weren't the one that instigated it.
Mom must have bought them.
She did. She did. She helped me pick them out. Now that we have talked about the children and whatnot, I want to ask you, what do you find more frightening? The children and the paranormal and the demon, or the abusive father?
I have thought about that, and I was hoping that the abusive father would get killed in this movie, so I was happy that he was eventually killed.
Yep.
I can't really answer that, but I think that's a great question that you just asked me about that, because there were parallel things going at one point of this movie where this woman and her 2 kids are dealing with an abusive father who they're not living with at that very moment. They're actually hiding out in a place that nobody's supposed to be living in because a bunch of people had been killed there before. Nobody was living there, so they moved there to hide. Here we're going along with the theme of the movie, the Sinister, and then the dad comes in and he's this mean, abusive person.
Yeah.
And he becomes another part of the complete evil.
I definitely am frightened of the paranormal, but I personally don't believe in ghosts and things like that. So for me, it almost felt like commentary stating that the real demons are in the real world, because what happened to them wouldn't have happened if they stayed in the house and they didn't have the conflict with the abusive father, because their death and whatnot only happens after they move away from the house, essentially spreading this curse. So if they had stayed in the house without the abusive father, there wouldn't have been that ending. But then there he was, and there they were at the dinner table, and he was forcefully shoving potatoes in his son's face.
Yeah, that was disconcerting.
Talk
about mashed potatoes.
Oh, Dad, don't. Let's not joke about abuse,
sorry.
okay? Okay. Don't worry. It's okay. It's just I don't want to promote that we are making light of abusive situations, because that's a very, very serious problem. So
it is a serious problem, but that particular movie, everything happened because there was an abusive husband, father.
Yeah, they had to run away because of him.
Yep.
They had to leave the house because of him.
The whole movie in Sinister 2 was because of this abusive father, which I never thought about. It's a good point.
Yeah. So as we saw in this movie, the young boy, by the way, there have been spoilers everywhere, I'm so sorry. The young boy in this movie, not Dylan, but the evil brother Zach, wasn't obviously born evil, but he grew up watching his abusive father only beat up his brother, and he himself was never touched, so he learned that behavior, and I think it's good that this movie kind of shined a spotlight on that. But the ending made me a little bit uncomfortable, and I'm just curious what you thought of this son. So he obviously was trying to kill his family. That's terribly wrong and messed up. He had a lot of issues concerning the way that he viewed his family, the way he spoke to his mother, the way that he treated his brother. But do you think that he deserved to be taken away into the projector, into the demon's world, while crumbling away as a skeleton? Do you think that was deserved? Because he was only a child. I don't know.
Well, looking back at it, I would say no. But at the moment, yes, because you just saw he was a junior version of his father. So you had 2 bad things going with this guy. And you don't realize it for a long time, by the way. You don't know that he's an evil brother. It takes quite a while in the movie before you even find that out. But once he becomes the evil brother who's mean to his mother and mean to his brother, just like his dad is, and he's hooked up with these ghoulish children in the basement with the projector, then he's just really bad. But he was a product of an abusive family. And if it wasn't for that, he probably would never have gone along with the little zombie children down in the basement.
That whole family dynamic was just so disturbing, and I think that it's something that isn't really talked about too often, certainly not in horror, but I feel like it was making a commentary on that a little bit. I wasn't a super big fan of the ending. While in the moment I wanted the brother to pay for what he'd done, I was very uncomfortable watching him waste away in the hands of the demon, because I have no idea. We don't know what happens to the children when they fail to kill their family, and then the demon takes them anyways. Boogle, that was highly disturbing, but these movies are rated R for a reason. I think we're gonna wrap it up pretty soon, but I do have one more question, and do you think that Sinister 2 deserves to have a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes?
No, on both of these movies, I think they're worthwhile. People that like horror movies, I would recommend both of them. They weren't fantastic. They didn't get into much character development at all. They were both shot basically in single locations, just in these houses. But the movie projector and the films that were shown on them made this movie worth watching, in my personal opinion.
It's very unique.
I mean, that unique part of it is why I think that it is worthwhile for people to see both of the movies. They're not real deep, and they did leave the second movie open-ended, so if they wanted to do a third one, they could do one.
James Ranson, the guy who plays the deputy, I looked him up, and it just says deputy when you look up the cast, so I don't know his name. But I thought that he really made the second movie, and his performance was just so funny. He's also in It Chapter 2, and he's clearly a comedian. He's very funny, and so the moments of levity and the moments of humor that work as comedic relief really do work, and they are genuinely funny because of him. And so I think his performance definitely elevates this movie far higher than a 16%. I think that the rating of the first one at a 64, it's still a little bit low, but I think it's fair.
It's fair.
I would maybe give these movies a 70, 60, 70, somewhere between there, maybe.
Yeah.
The second one a little bit lower, certainly, but not a 16%. That's incredibly low. Especially when you consider a lot of the Friday the 13th movies that I've been reviewing, and those are all rated, well, it's a wide range, but you have them in the 20s and 30s and even in the 60s, and those movies were not very well made. This movie, Sinister 2, was made very well with good acting and whatnot, so it's just kind of annoying to me that it got a 16%, but we take the Rotten Tomatoes scores with a grain of salt.
I think that's very snobbish. There's no way that's a 16.
No.
I mean, there's just no way. I mean, even if you want to give it a 50, it's worth watching. And the concept with these films, these old films on this projector, makes it scary, makes it spooky, and puts you on edge. And you're right, the other part of the movie that was good was the deputy. And of the two movies, he's the only character that I really cared about.
Right, yeah.
Was him in the second movie, not the first.
Yeah.
The second movie, we actually had a good guy. We had a good person, a good guy trying to do good.
Right.
In the second movie. He was just very likable. And I just watched him in a crime TV show called Bosch on Amazon, where he plays a dirty cop for an entire season, which is funny to see him in this particular movie. But he was likable, he cared, he was trying to fix the situation. There's no way I could give that movie a 16.
So he has range if you want to see him as good cop at this movie and then bad cop
Harry
in this
Bosch
show.
on Amazon Prime.
And then also as this sniveling little guy in It Chapter 2 that plays Eddie, he's a hypochondriac and whatnot. He's really funny in It Chapter 2. I guess now I'm a fan of James Ranson as a horror actor. And then also, actually, I lied because I came upon an article that was written in 2018, and James Wan did an interview and had apparently talked about the idea of mixing the Insidious and Sinister universes. So I was wondering your thoughts on that. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
Whoa.
Now that I've mentioned this, if you have any sort of prediction, any sort of generalized comment just on that happening.
Well, as it is in most things in life, it's all about the money.
Money!
And if they did that, we'd watch it.
Oh, we'd certainly watch it. My prediction, I think it would still have something to do with the further, and maybe they would sort of explain it as Boogle had come through one of the red doors, and now he was sort of dwelling in the world, but in images.
Oh, you could definitely pull that
You know,
off.
I think there would be a way, and then maybe hopefully in the end, our Lynn Shay, our beloved Elise, would hopefully save the day or something.
Insidiously sinister.
Or in Sinister. Sinsidious.
Insidious?
In Sinister. I don't know. That's still kind of just a rumor. Don't know if that would happen, but I thought it would just be interesting to bring it up, and let me know what you guys would think about that as well. Do you have any final thoughts?
I can't wait to go back to the movie theaters and make sure you vote.
Yes, make sure you vote. Definitely sign that petition down below. If you do nothing else, please just support good causes. Well, we're back. We're definitely gonna be making more videos in the future. We just watched Psycho last night, and we'll probably be talking about some Alfred Hitchcock movies pretty soon, so definitely subscribe and stay tuned for that. I post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m, but if you turn on the notification bell, then you'll be notified every single time that I post. I also have a vlog channel, and that'll be linked down below as well. But I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you're glad that this dynamic duo is back at it again, and I hope that we catch you in the next one. Bye!
Peace out.
Cool, we did it. And I still have an hour till my dentist appointment. Ugh.